everyone, it's Christy with Cottage Grove Quilt Company. Thank you for joining me today in my studio as we do a discussion today about color. I love talking about color, and as you can see from behind me, I have a very colorful quilt. So let's talk a little bit about this very colorful quilt of mine. Right, so as we can see, what I have done here is I have taken and used a really amazing border with this quilt. Okay, so I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit on this border. So hopefully you can really see the color of that border. There you go. So that is the color and the pattern of the border. And so it's very striking, it's very stunning, and I really like using those kinds of borders on my quilts. Now what I did in this particular case is I worked with our Color Queen Barb, and I specifically fell in love with this border. When it came into our shop, it was one of the first fabrics that we ever purchased in our shop. And I loved it, but I wasn't the only one who did. I had to fight to get my 2 yards, okay? So I got my 2 yards from my border. And I thought, well, I'm going to do something with that someday, but I never knew what someday was, and I didn't have a plan. Well, then a colleague of mine designed this log cabin-esque pattern using the Studio 180 tools, and I just loved this pattern, and I said, you know what, that border would work great with that pattern. And so working with Color Queen Barb, I said, Queen Barb, I want to use this border, but let's get fabric to go with it. And so I said I'm okay with a white background, so we used the white for the background, and then we color played the blues from a light, a medium, a dark, color played the purples, a light, medium, and a dark, which was perfect. But then it was like, okay, what to go with it, what to pull from. So really studying out this border here, what colors would play well with that. We picked lime, as in lime green, lime margaritas, lime everything. And so this serpentine piece of the log cabin right here is all done in lime, which made the center right here pop with that lime. I thought that was just gorgeous. Now traditionally log cabins were done with a red center because that was the door front of your log cabin. But there's really no opportunity for red in this fabric anywhere. Red does not play in this fabric, nor would it work with the colors that we picked. So we decided to go with orange because there is some orange in the printing of this fabric here, and it just played really well with the other fabrics. So I wanted to show you this quilt today to kind of help talk to you a little bit about not being afraid of color. So many people come into the shop and they say, you know, I just can't even begin to think what color goes with what and how I can pull these colors together. Well, there's several ways you can do this. For one, if you look at the salvage of your material, a lot of times a fabric designer will put little color droplets on the salvage of the material. And that is in order to tell you, these are the following shades of fabric colors that would work well. The other thing to think about is how much print you're using and what the print is going to be represented. Now for me, with a bold print like what's behind me, I'm going to want that in my border. But then the rest of my material, while it is a print, it is a texture print or a tone-on-tone print. So that way it reads more like a solid, but there is enough interest going on. It's not a straight solid. So, you know, for me, if I'm using a bold, exuberant background, then I'm going to use a solid tone-on-tone foreground. So that way my prints aren't competing with one another. Additionally, you can invest in things like a color wheel or a color card that can kind of help instruct you on complementary colors and secondary colors and primary colors to show you what colors go well with one another. But a lot of people really think, well, I just don't know what to do, and you get really lost. Well, if you don't know what to do and get really lost, you can always call us and we'll help you. Or you can purchase a pre-cut and let the designer do the work for you. Color is nothing to be afraid of, and you would be surprised. There's just some things that just aren't going to work. No matter how much you do it, certain colors just are not going to work. But yet, at other instances, like I would never pair hot pink and red together. I would never pair them together. In no certain circumstances would I do it. They're too similar. But I happened to see a quilt one time that had hot pink and red in it, and that was the only colors in it, and it was made out of the Kaif fabric. Well, because it was made out of Kaif fabric, there was enough activity going on in the fabric that it actually brought interest to the quilt, and it actually turned out real nice. I was kind of surprised. But for me, I also like to think of color balance and how I balance my colors. So, I'm going to pick a background, and I'll start either if I have a piece of fabric that's a print, like what's behind me, that is just stands up and says, that's the print I want to use, and I'm going to put it in my border, then I'm going to look at that and say, okay, what background fabric would make that border pop? Now, if I was to use a background that was black, I would have lost a lot of the color in that border, even though that border, all the activity print that's on it, all the printing is on a black background. If I would have done a black background in the quilt, I don't think I would have had the same effect. It just wouldn't have worked. It needed something that was a contrast. And you really need to let those contrasts play off of one another. So, with that black background and all that heavy print, it needed a contrast against it. So, that would be where I would use a white or some other color. By using the lime green as the serpentine of the log cabin, it really created an effect. Now, I wanted that color to really stand out because I want you to see the design. It's real easy for us to pick a color to where it's too much like the other colors. For example, if I would have picked a lavender color or a teal color, it would have been too similar to the blues and the purples that you would have never seen the serpentine. You needed something that was going to pop, something that was going to give it an accent, something that would get it to stand out on its own. So that is why I picked lime green. And then for the center, the orange just really made a huge difference to stand out in the orange. It just was very stunning. Orange is not a color you would think to use too often unless you were doing a Tennessee Vols quilt. But it really can play nicely with some of the bolder colors. So don't be afraid to use orange. It is not just for pumpkins. Okay? As you can see from this example here, it turned out to be, again, a very stunning and attractive quilt. Very stunning and attractive quilt. And, again, it's all about the color play of it. When you pick a color, like we picked the purples and the blues to complement that border stripe, we picked that, and then it was like, okay, now I need a light, medium, and a dark. And that's where you play with the value. So we pick a color, but what's the next couple of shades lighter of the value? Well, then that's my medium. What's a few shades lighter in the value spectrum? That's my light. Now, by value spectrum, I will say every color, whether it's red, white, yellow, or green, has different values to it. So that's going to be how much green is in that green. Is it 100% green, or is it 90% green, or is it 85% green? It's just, it's how much that color is penetrating it. So, you're playing on gradations of value print. So that's something to remember. So I want to encourage you guys not to be afraid of color. Color is your friend, and be sure to use some bold colors. And if you're uncertain about what colors go well, look at the salvage of your fabric, and it will help guide you. Or another thing is to pick colors all from the same collection of fabric. So fabric is distributed, by a fabric company, and most collections have anywhere from 10 to 40 different prints in a collection of fabric. Now, we typically may not buy the whole collection. Sometimes we do. But what you can do then is you can shop that whole collection and everything will match automatically because that's what it was designed to do. So then it helps take the fear of color out of the equation. It does. So I want you to be encouraged with color. I want you to play with color and, try some things and see how it works out. Again, I have a design board so I can audition things really well, but don't be afraid to try color. And if you ever need help with it, just reach out to us. We'd be glad to give you some advice. All right, thank you and have a good day.